Hey, welcome to Tank Talk. I'm your host, Bob Tankard. And this evening's guest is a special person. When I first met Senator Sayre was probably 3 years ago when he was running for senator. And I just like to tell you, you and Dylan have done an excellent job. You know what I mean? And helping out the Cape and Islands. Sometimes people forget about us. They always think we're the rich and famous out here, but that's not true. But I want to thank you, Senator Sayre, for coming on and spending some time with us.
Well, Dr. Tankard, first of all, it's so nice to be with you in person. I think we've done a little bit of this
We've
in
done
the
this
past few
before,
years.
yeah.
But
yeah.
in person, I think it's been almost 2 years since
almost
we
2
actually
years,
were able
right.
to film this.
You know, it's been unbelievable. I'm saying to myself, gee, where is it? When Dylan was here, Senator, he was here probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago before I went on vacation, and he came. And I said, well, you know, how's your buddy Senator Sayre? He says, he's as busy as I am. He said, we're running around in circles.
And you know, it was 6 years ago when we first ran for office. I'm in
That's
my
right.
my third term. Isn't that wild? We're like the young guys. I know. I'm still young, but
hey, you're doing a great job. And
thank you. That means a lot.
So tell me some of them. What are the changes are you undertaking this year?
So we're working on a whole host of challenges. You know, as we're you know, as we've been able in this session to work on really substantive policy in addition to responding to the pandemic. You know, so that's everything from mental health and substance use, which I chair in the Senate.
Right.
I've been trying to do a lot of work
So
on
you're the
housing.
chair of that?
I chair that committee. I also serve as the assistant majority whip in the
Wow.
Senate. So serving leadership there, we get to be at the table.
For 6 years, you moved up quick.
I did. We had an unexpected Senate presidency vacancy in my first term. So I'm in a really fortunate position in the Senate, and I feel like I get to do a lot of good stuff on behalf of Islanders and Cape Codders. But we've got really big, challenges, many of which we had sort of pre-pandemic, but some of them have been really exacerbated. Certainly the climate crisis, which for here, you make your life on an island, you make your life on a peninsula. We're going to be really affected by this.
I want to ask you a question, because I asked Dylan this question also. Governor Baker, he beat out the Democratic incumbent person before. Who is going to take his place? Who's running to take his place?
So we've got, it's an election year.
Yeah.
There's 2 Republicans running, and there's 2 Democrats running. One of whom is Maura, Healey, our Attorney General.
Right.
Odds-on favorite, I think, to win the primary, to win that election.
Is she that strong?
Maura's amazing.
Okay.
Maura's been a real partner to me in a whole host of issues, and especially as openly LGBTQ people serving in public life. Actually, week before last, I was down in D.C. for the National Victory Fund, Victory Institute, which brings together LGBTQ leaders. And Maura was speaking at the event. I was down there with her. But, we're still able to get a lot, we're getting a lot done. The Senate just took up and passed a very comprehensive climate law, a bill that actually builds upon a law. We was signed into law last year. But we expand our offshore wind capacity, which is a huge deal here on the island. If this bill is passed and signed into law, we'll produce a third of the nation's offshore wind energy goals that the president has. A third of that will be produced right here in Massachusetts waters. It's pretty remarkable. And trying to do everything we can to limit carbon emissions. Also getting at the built environment. That's sort of the trickier piece, right? We know what to do around electricity generation. We know what to do in transportation, right? We need to all go electric. In the built environment, that's a lot harder because a lot of our homes are, look, we got these old antique homes here, which are beautiful.
Right, and how do you upgrade them?
Upgrade them and retrofit. So that's what we're trying to wrestle with and figure out.
Okay, listen, I want to ask you a question because, I watch the news every night, and I know what we're doing in the Boston area and us here, and I look at the government. How close do you work with our federal senators and representatives? How do you guys talk a lot with each other?
So
because one of the reasons I'm saying this is this. When Biden came into office, I don't know anybody that wanted to take on that. He came in, he had to climb up out of that hole that was already dug. And needed support. And I personally feel, this is just me, I feel he's done a good job getting us out of the hole so far and trying to move in a direction to keep democracy to keep equality where it needs to be. Okay,
Yeah.
I think he's done a good. And I know some people and some friends of mine that think, oh, he's this. Wait a minute. I said the hole that he had to come up out of when he was in it, when he was put there, is amazing. Tell me.
If you look at the indicators of, especially in our economy, and we're doing so strong. I think the challenge, of course, is inflation, which we're all trying to grapple with. But we've got a great congressional delegation. When it really matters is the relationships of it, right? So you don't talk every day, of course.
Right.
That would be incredible.
Right.
But when issues come up, having those sort of relationships with Congressman Keating to work through the H-2B issues, or Senator Markey really trying to respond to Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station, or Senator Warren, who's just such a sort of visionary.
Right.
Those relationships, and she's coming to the Cape actually next week. Those relationships I think are really important, and I feel grateful to have those relationships, that they have our back when we need them, and so they're great partners and they're good friends to the island. We got to get them over here though.
Wait a minute. I want to ask you.
Yeah.
When are you going to move to D.C.?
Me to D.C.?
When are you going to take one of those representative or senators positions if they come up?
If they come up.
Well, I know you're running again this time.
Yeah, I'm running again for state senate.
So we got at least 4 more years. Yeah. So by 4 years, you'd have a good, 12 years, 12
I would have, I will be going into my if I'm reelected, it's my 7th year in office.
Okay.
I love my job. I love being state senator because you really tangibly get to work on issues that affect people, right? We're trying to fix the housing crisis here, right? I get to be a partner and try to figure out this housing bank that you guys all support. Right. Helping people with mental health, which is such a crisis today. So you get to work on really substantive things that mean a lot to people in the state
And you don't
Senate.
get a chance to do that in the state a lot, huh?
You get to do that at the state level. At the congressional level, the federal level is a whole different kind of ball game. So I'm not in any rush to leave my current gig, but look, it's politics, so as opportunities come. Every
state has done something to try to support this Ukraine situation. This devastating.
And us too in Massachusetts.
And Massachusetts is doing that. What has the Senate, the state representatives in our state, what have we come up with? What are we doing?
So we took up and passed a supplemental budget just at the end of March that includes divestment from Russia. It's not a substantial amount of the investment portfolios in the state, but it's meaningful. And this was an amendment filed by a colleague of mine that we adopted unanimously in the Senate, and the House agreed to it and did their work, and the governor signed it into law. So I think on that piece, we're doing what we can, right? It's not a lot, but the divestment piece I think is important.
It's better than nothing.
Look, we don't. This is unacceptable. This puts, the free world order.
Now, how would we? There was something on the news that talked about somebody. I want to say immigrants, but they're really displacements coming into Massachusetts. How many would we be able to accept?
It's a good question. I don't know a ton about the specifics of it. I do know we had actually some really great participation in Falmouth with the Afghan refugee program.
Right.
So. We'll stay tuned on that. I don't yet know how that's going to work.
But COVID has been up and down. And I think, again, this is my opinion, I think that our state officials have done a magnificent job in controlling, when to wear a mask, not to wear a mask, when to raise it, when to lower it, and whatnot. And it's something that what we're facing with now with this virus is more than what we faced with the flu, the regular flu, although the flu had many options and things. How do you, I have problems with people not wanting to participate in doing the right thing. And I've always participated on teams, and teams that you had to do what was good for the team, not just what was good for you. There's no I in team, okay? And I say to myself, I think that the governor and the state house and everything is trying to, what's your objective to that? How are you guys handling that?
So overall, I'm really proud at how the Cape and Islands as a region really responded to COVID-19 and worked collaboratively. Amazing stuff happened here on the island, right? Pulling people together, getting testing, all those sort of pieces, especially when we were left behind. I think right now it's really about making sure that people have information and tools to assess their own risk and to keep themselves safe, right? And what you're doing. What you should be doing, maybe if you're a healthy person and doesn't have any respiratory issues or any of those sort of challenges, versus someone who has comorbidities or other sort of risk factors, I think the key now is you've got to kind of gauge in this period, right, where you see a low level of cases, take into account what your personal risk is, right? What's the risk to folks who are living with you? If you've got an immunocompromised spouse at home, maybe you want to mask up. Look, if you're a single 30-something-year-old guy like me, maybe that that can be different. I think what is key though is that we understand.
But even 30 years old, you start looking at some of these people that have gotten this virus and then passed. They weren't all 65 and older.
No, it depends on those comorbidities,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Lung-related issues, a lot of concern around other, other sort of comorbidities, and that's where I think you got to take that into account. What we need to be prepared for in government, and we're working on this, and we'll continue to, is if and when there's a new variant or there's a surge of cases, right? We got to be prepared to have the testing in place, urging people to distance, potentially masking. The whole focus, though, is really making sure that COVID cases don't overwhelm the healthcare system. And so that's really been much of the goal, right? To save lives, to keep people safe. But also, I think we also need to consider saving livelihoods, right? So
but Senator, how do you do
balance.
that? How do you do that when you have individuals out there that think this is a joke, that think this is just put on, that think this is not real?
Yeah.
When you watch the local news or the national news, and you see this guy gets in he's all got the mask on and everything. I want to tell my friends it's real, it's no joke, And the next thing you know, you found out the person's died. How many people have to see that same thing over and over again to realize, no, this is real? But one thing what bothers me more than anything?
Yeah.
If you choose you don't want to participate,
yeah,
then at least respect those people
who do.
Right.
And that's where I think we've got to just put first and foremost, you got to meet people where they are,
right.
and especially for people who are still masking up for keeping their distance. There's a lot of good reasons why you should keep doing that. I don't have a broader answer for where we are nationally. I feel grateful to be in Massachusetts where, look, our COVID response was not a partisan issue, that, people from all stripes of political parties and walks of life, followed COVID protocols. I think we had a lot of success relatively after that first real surge we saw in spring 2020. So I feel like I'm glad to be working at the state
my wife
level. It's easier at the state level.
Right. My wife and I just came back from Aruba.
You were telling me,
and the fact is that when we went down, we had to have our paperwork, making sure that we had our 3 shots, making sure everything was up to date. Okay, so we went down.
Yep.
Right. Coming back, the day before we were able to get on that plane, we had to have a test. Okay. And the hotel we were at gave him, but my wife and I went to the hospital, which is right, we could see the hospital. And they gave us the test there. And I said, if we fail this test, man, we can get another 5 days in this sunny weather. But we had one friend and the wife failed the test.
Wow.
She had to stay 5 days, and they took her,
Yeah.
Very discreetly, isolated her to this place that they have down there. And the husband had to stay in another hotel for 5 days,
Wow.
But it wasn't many, but it was very well organized, and how they help people get back, keep their comfort and respect, and get back home.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Working with the United States in that. And
That's
I said to
remarkable.
myself, you can't ask for more than that. And they were all working together, and that's what I'd like to see. Housing. Housing is an issue on the Cape and on the island. I was just talking to my veteran brothers over there at the Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach Center, and they're doing the veteran housing like we're trying to do here on the Vineyard, and they have one in Dennis and everything. But housing in general has escalated in prices. On the island, houses are $1 million. I'm talking about a 3-bedroom house on a quarter of an acre of land, $1 million. That's tough. On the Cape, which you have a lot more versatility and a lot more distance you can carry, prices are up $600,000-$700,000 for 2-3-bedroom houses. How are we going to manage that? How, as a state, can help these towns?
So this is, this has been a crisis for 20 years, and really what I think the pandemic did is just sort of push us past a tipping point, right? And we realized that, particularly for people who were able to work remotely or were able to have more flexibility in their life because of the pandemic, they wanted a piece of Martha's Vineyard, of Nantucket, of Cape Cod. And so we've seen, 20% increase in housing prices in a year in Cape Cod. It's even higher on the island. It's just reached a point where if you are a working person making a life on the island or on Cape Cod and the Outer Cape, my neck of the woods is very, very sort of similar, right? The Outer Cape, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, we're all in a pretty similar boat here. You just can't make it. I mean, I can't even afford property in the part of the district that I live, and I do fine.
Right.
And so I think we've really reached this point where we've gotta very aggressively address housing. I think part of that really has to be housing production. We need to be able to build affordable and workforce housing for the people who live here, who make this place run.
Right. You see our 2 boats in the morning, the 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock
Packed.
boats in the morning, packed, 100 each. I'm saying to myself, and they come from the other side, and quite a few of them. I'm not going to say a quarter of them, but I'd say a good 10%, 20% of them are island people that used to live here that find it easier to live off the other side and come over here to work.
And they're doing, they're working at the hospital, they're working in the fire department, right? They're teachers, they're people doing essential work. So there's been a lot of
how much land do you have over on the Cape that can have?
It's really
how big is your state forest over there?
It's really as constricted as it is here. Right?
It is
where the land is either in conservation, right? It's in the national park or the state forest, or developable land is very limited on Cape Cod, and it's very limited here. And look, we've got a fragile environment, and we need to be good stewards of that environment. But I really see a real intersection between the housing crisis and the wastewater crisis that we've got.
Right.
And this is where on the Cape we're a little ahead of the island, right?
Right.
But you guys have major issues, particularly in the lagoons, with nitrogen from Tidal V septic systems.
Right.
We've got those same issues on the Cape. We worked really hard to establish what's called the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, which is a mechanism to provide additional support for these wastewater projects. Island towns actually have a decision. They can decide if they want to come in.
How do you do that over on the Cape? How is that done? I know over here they're looking at this new nitrogen project where they're putting wood chips in, and that's supposed to be able to absorb into the water and give it off, the nitrogen off in the air, versus going through the ground into the water table into the pond.
Yep. So it depends what kind of system you're talking about. Everything from like traditional pipes and pumps and sewering, which there's a need for, especially in Tisbury and Edgartown and Novi, the down island towns.
Right.
Then there's also these alternative systems, like you were talking about, that essentially use a Tidal V septic system but have add-ons to take out the nitrogen, to take out the phosphorus. Yeah. We're going to have to do sort of all of the above. But the cool thing is if you address wastewater, right, especially with expanding a sewer system, that allows you to build more densely. And what we need, right, we need to build sort of denser places for people to live that look a lot, they look an awful like our downtowns, right? They look like Vineyard Haven or Edgartown. And I think that focus there. So you guys have had a lot of success, and I'm really proud of Islanders, in this housing bank conversation. Really unanimous, very strong support at 4 town meetings. We've got 2 more town meetings to go. That bill then is going to go to the legislature for consideration. Dylan and I will work on it. So that's a really good start. But I think that, we also need to look at, town by town, zoning. How do we, where do we find places that we're going to have to build more housing?
Let me ask you a question, because this is a
how
question.
How to preserve housing too, yeah.
But this is a question that's come up. If you fly over the island, I know you've done that 100 times.
I just flew in today.
and you look at. I'm not saying that we should just rush to eliminate the state forest. I'm not saying that, but I'm looking at the state forest covers just about every piece of the island towns. And I'm saying to myself, for affordable housing, workforce housing, is it a possibility that we could take parts of it from each town to develop those places and still keep a state forest?
So that would really be, I defer to the Vineyard Commission and other folks who'd actually know sort of the breakdown on island versus, the state forest versus, other sort of developable land. But it's possible, right? We need to take an action.
Because, where else are you going to put places? Where else are you going to, unless you tear down a house, an old house, and the zoning bylaws give you the permission to alter it so to make it more density and be able to put more people in that area. I don't know.
I really think an all the above approach, where sort of any good ideas on the table, is what's needed, because we have such an acute crisis, and it's only getting worse.
It is.
What we're trying to do is to doing a lot of work to make the financing fee for this housing bank possible. That's for via a transfer fee on luxury real estate. That's not something that's a foregone conclusion in the legislature. Dylan and I are working really hard to allow island towns to do this, and also other communities. Nantucket wants to do this. Provincetown wants to do this. The city of Boston wants to do it with a transfer fee. So that hopefully, if we can get that done in the next coming months and years.
Do you find the same thing happening, say, throughout the southeast of Massachusetts, and out in the western part of the state? When you meet with your the state representatives, the senators from those places, are they having the same issues?
Housing is a huge issue, particularly in eastern Massachusetts. It's arguably most acute here and on Nantucket and on the Outer Cape, but across the Cape and Islands, and then in Greater Boston, housing prices are just so expensive. That Greater Boston market has now eclipsed San Francisco in being the most expensive housing market in the country. Wow. And a lot of that is actually because we just haven't really allowed much housing production. And so you'll have community rail stations will be running through communities, and it's all single family 1-bedroom homes. We should be building more densely along our infrastructure. Here, we should be looking at how our 19th century fishing villages were built, which is actually quite dense, relying on those kind of models and those that sort of planning. But this is a really tough issue, and for islanders who've been working on this for a long time, and I know this from the Cape. I mean, I feel like I was an intern in 2006 writing about the housing crisis on the Outer Cape, and it's only gotten worse, and I feel the pandemic has really pushed us past the tipping point.
Is it because the populations have, I can remember when I came to the vineyard in 1961, the vineyard had like 4,200 people year round. And in the summertime, the summer people would come to their cottages, and most of them were just cottages because, and it was probably maybe 35 to maybe 40,000 that would come in the summertime. Now we have 22,000 plus in the winter, and over 110, 120,000 on any given day in the summertime, okay? Quite an increase. Was the vision of the past to look to the future? Were they ready for this big, and it came so quick?
I don't know, because I wasn't around in that period.
Right.
I kind of don't know my exact history there. I think that what we've seen is a tremendous demand for people who've realized, I can have and I want to have a piece of this pretty amazing place, and I want to live here, and I can now work here. And, they're able in a really tight housing market, right, where there's not a lot of inventory. Right. When you have someone who's able to come in and say, all right, I'll purchase this like $2 million home, cash offer, cash only, no contingencies, right? How the hell is a teacher and a firefighter? You can't do it. I can't do it on the Outer Cape. And so this is where, the housing market is just driven by a luxury real estate market that just doesn't, you and I are just never going to compete in that. And so that's why the towns have to get into the business of housing production. That's why this housing bank is so darn essential. And I'm really proud of Islanders for, really stepping up, organizing. We still got some ways to go here on this, but, it shows that I think most Islanders really see this as a critical issue and understand that we've got to take action here.
Senator, back in the middle to late 70s, one of the superintendents was a good friend of mine. In fact, he was my coach when he came up to be superintendent. We had the bridge over in Chappaquiddick was hit, and then we had the movie Jaws. And that really made Martha's Vineyard noticeable around the world, especially throughout the country. People started buying property, buying houses. The houses went from $14,000 started getting up to $20,000 to $30,000 to $60,000. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm saying to myself, and as a teacher, I'm saying, we used to have 20 teachers applying for this job, and all of a sudden it's down to 10 now. Something's happening. So I went to him and I said, maybe the school system should buy 10 houses. And I said, for administrators, counselors, and for some teachers. And he says, why? I said, well, the population is getting big. I said, housing is going to be an issue. I said, people are not going to be able to, oh, no, nothing's going to happen. That's not going to happen. A year and a half later, he came to me. He said, how did you know? I said, Coach, I said, listen, I said, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see what was happening. And when I was principal of the West Tisbury School from 92 to 2001, the applications for jobs went from 15 down to 4.
Yeah.
Because people couldn't sell their house on any place off island for $200,000, and they had a decent, nice-sized house, and come to Martha's Vineyard and spend $400,000 for a house smaller. They couldn't do it, so there was no sense in them applying for the job, and the money wasn't different. So it's those type of things, and it's really a shame.
I mean, this is the pattern that's been playing out, for decades,
Yeah.
and really we're at a point where most large employers, especially in the private sector here, you're a large restaurant or a hotel or a construction firm or sort of whatever, you're increasingly providing housing. The hospital is looking to build housing for their staff, and it's the towns I think that are realizing, oh shoot, like we need to have housing for like teachers and DPW workers and administrators, and so in a certain way, the public sector is sort of catching up to what the private sector's been doing for years.
A lot of businesses are buying an extra house to.
Oh, they've been doing it for years.
To put their help in.
Of course. I mean, my family did this. We had a restaurant for 30 years, and even back in the 90s and aughts, we had housing for some of our workers because you just have to have that. And that's always been the case, but I think now, most of us and most Islanders, I think it's clear from the town meeting results, see housing as this absolute acute, if not existential issue for us. And that's why I've got so much hope about this housing bank.
You're up for re-election.
I'm up for re-election, yeah.
And you're up for re-election, and it's a lot of things that's on your plate that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that's on your plate that you want to see done at the present time and into the next term? And how do you expect that, and who do you need to help you to get that done?
So I've been doing a tremendous amount of work around mental health. Mental health is like one of our top priorities in the Senate. I chaired that committee, as we talked about earlier, and actually the Senate took up and we unanimously passed a bill I authored this past November called the Mental Health ABC Act, which gives us a roadmap around how we can actually transform this pretty fragmented, we don't really have a mental health system, right? We got this fragmented kind of series of care through insurance reforms, through ensuring access, building up our workforce in the American Rescue Plan dollars that we've appropriated. We've allocated $110 million for a behavioral health workforce pipeline, basically loan repayments to track people into this field. So we've done a ton of work on that in the Senate. The House is likely to take up a mental health bill soon. Then we're going to reconcile those two in a conference committee. The legislative session ends July 31st, so we got 3 months and change to get this bill done. But it's been a real important priority, for me, and even before the pandemic, it certainly was. I think what the pandemic revealed, right, is that everyone I think has a newfound appreciation that mental health just isn't this nice to have thing, right? It's absolutely essential. And as someone who, in my own life, I've struggled with anxiety and depression, and so to be able to sort of make a difference on this sort of issue. So that's a big thing I want to get done. But we got a lot on our plate. That climate bill, we got a budget to do, a whole host of other things, some important vineyard bills we're trying to get done.
Well, we'd have run out of time, but I just want to let you know this. I don't want to have to wait 2 years for you to come back.
I know. It was only because of the pandemic.
I don't want to wait 2 years for you to
Coach.
come back. And we're wishing you your success. And after you win the next time, both you and Dylan need to come back on.
I know we got to do it.
And when we do have our ribbon cutting for our veteran home housing, we want you and both Dylan to come back and to participate in that and support us. And I want to thank you for coming on and spending time on the vineyard. I know you're busy, but if you want something done, give it to a busy person. Okay?
I like that.
Okay. And thank you for tuning in to Turn Tank Talk. Until next time, this is your host, Bob Tankard, saying good evening.